You thought you made it. You had the job, the apartment, the account balance that finally stopped scaring you at 2 a.m. You thought this was what arriving felt like. But there's a moment, and you remember it exactly, when you're sitting at a dinner you can now afford, and you look around the table, and something cold moves through you. Not fear, not gratitude, something quieter than both. You don't say anything. You just pick up your glass and take a slow sip. And you realize the truth was never about the money. You grew up in a house where the heat got turned down at night. Not because it was cold outside, but because someone, somewhere, decided that was the responsible thing to do. You learned to wear an extra sweater. You never thought to ask why. Dinner was whatever was on sale that week. Your parents checked the total before they got to the register. Not nervously, just carefully, like it was normal, like everyone did it. You assumed they did. Saturday mornings had a specific smell. Coffee, newsprint, the sound of someone doing math on paper. Your father sat at the kitchen table with a pen, not a calculator, and circled things in the bills. You didn't know what he was circling. You just knew his face looked like he was losing a game he had to keep playing anyway. At school, you didn't talk about money. Nobody did. But you noticed things. The kid who got new shoes every September. The kid who always had lunch from home in a small brown bag. You were somewhere in the middle, or so you thought. The middle felt safe. The middle felt permanent. The middle felt like the answer. You were 8 years old, and you had already decided what you were. The strange part? Nobody told you. You just absorbed it. You got older. You got good at things. School. Showing up. Doing what was asked. You got a part-time job at 17. $8.50 an hour. You remember the exact number because you calculated everything against it. That shirt, 3 hours. That concert, 6 hours and 20 minutes. That mistake you couldn't return, 2 days of work, gone. You started measuring life in hours of labor. You didn't know that wasn't healthy. It just felt accurate. College came, or it didn't. Either way, there was a plan. And the plan felt like progress because it was forward motion. And forward motion felt like escape. Escape from what? You couldn't say exactly. Just from the thing you felt on those Saturday mornings. That circling bills feeling. That quiet losing. You were 22 and working 2 jobs and eating the $1.89 ramen not because it was the only option, but because spending more felt dangerous. Felt like something your father would have circled in red. You were not broke, but you lived like something was always about to go wrong. You noticed it. You didn't examine it. Something shifted around 25. Not dramatically, just a slow rotation, like furniture moved 2 inches to the left in a dark room. You kept bumping into it. You got the job they said to get. The one with the benefits and the title that sounded like stability. You wore clothes that said you belonged there. But at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, sitting at a desk in an open-plan office, fluorescent light, cold coffee, inbox at 47 unread, you had a thought you didn't expect. I followed every rule, and I'm still tired. Not tired like sleep-deprived. Tired like used. You looked around. The other people at their desks had the same look. Not unhappy exactly. Just somewhere else. Already gone from the room they were still sitting in. You started noticing things you hadn't let yourself notice before. Your boss drove the same model car for 6 years. Not because he couldn't afford a new one. Because he reinvested. You didn't know what that meant yet. But you wrote it down. Your colleague, 3 cubicles over, had been there 11 years. She mentioned it once, flatly, like a diagnosis. 11 years. You did the math. At your current pace, you'd still be here when you were 37. The number didn't scare you. That's what scared you. The map they gave you led somewhere, just not somewhere you chose. You started reading things you weren't supposed to be reading at work. Not articles, books, forums, conversations between people who talked about money like it was a system, something you could learn the rules of, not just survive inside. You read about assets, liabilities, leverage, compounding, words you'd heard before but never felt like they applied to you. Now they did. You opened a brokerage account on a Thursday evening at 9:47 p.m. with $300. You remember the exact amount because you moved it 3 times before committing. Put it in, took it out, put it back. $300. You felt like you were doing something slightly illegal. You weren't, but the feeling was real. During the day, you were the reliable employee, nodding in meetings, sending the email they were waiting for, making the coffee run without being asked. At night, you were reading about the people who owned the building where you worked. 2 lives, same body. The strange part was, you started seeing differently. The mall wasn't just stores anymore. It was rent, foot traffic, revenue per square foot. The restaurant where you grabbed lunch wasn't just food. It was margin, labor cost, franchise model. You started looking at everything like you were trying to understand who owned it. And slowly, uncomfortably, you started to understand something you couldn't yet say out loud. You weren't building anything. You were funding someone else's building. The realization sat in you like something swallowed wrong. You didn't tell anyone. This is the part that's hard to explain to someone who hasn't felt it. You're sitting across from your parents at a Sunday dinner. The same table, the same plates. Your mother made the same thing she always makes on Sundays. And you love her for it. But you're not the same person who used to sit here. You know that now. You've been reading for 2 years. You've made small moves, nothing dramatic, nothing loud. But your relationship with money has quietly, fundamentally changed. And the person your family thinks you are, the one who's doing well, who followed the path, who has the job and the apartment and the responsible savings account, that person is not entirely real anymore. You feel it in the specific way you respond when your father says, "Good pension plan. That's the important thing." You nod. You say, "Yeah, definitely." You don't say what you actually think, which is, a pension at 65 is not a plan. It's a waiting room. You don't say it because it would sound like you're attacking something. And you're not. You understand now why they believe what they believe. You understand the Saturday mornings, the circling, the extra sweater at night. They were doing the only thing they were ever taught to do. But you are standing in a doorway between 2 worlds, and one of them doesn't have a door back. You stop explaining what you're doing. Not because you're ashamed. Because the explanation requires context they were never given. And you were given it only recently, at 9:47 on a Thursday night, in front of a $300 brokerage account that felt slightly illegal. This is the moment. Not the moment you made money. The moment you realized you were no longer who you thought you were. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like loss. Something left you that night and didn't come back. You haven't decided yet if that's a good thing. You didn't quit your job dramatically. You didn't tell anyone what you were doing. You just kept going. Quietly. Consistently. 18 months after that $300, you had 14,000 in positions you understood. Not guesses. Not hype. Things you had read about, modeled in a notebook, washed through one full market cycle. One Sunday morning you checked your portfolio, and it was up more than your monthly salary for the first time. You didn't celebrate. You sat very still and felt something unfamiliar in your chest. Not excitement. Something more serious than excitement. You called no one. You went to the kitchen, made coffee the slow way, the way that takes 8 minutes instead of 2, and stood at the window while it brewed. Outside, a man was washing his car in the driveway across the street. The same car. Every Sunday. You watched him. You thought, he's not wrong. Neither am I. We just see Sunday mornings differently now. The distance you felt was not superiority. It was just distance. An awareness that where you were standing was no longer where you started. You drank your coffee. You went back to work on Monday and said nothing. Progress doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, like a light you didn't notice getting brighter. This is the part no one warns you about. You thought escaping the middle class would feel like relief. It doesn't. It feels like standing in a new room and realizing it's just another room. The people here have different problems. Not smaller, just different. More abstract. Less about next month, more about next decade. Less about making rent, more about making the right bet on the right asset in the right year. The anxiety doesn't disappear. It just wears different clothes. You're at a dinner now. Nice restaurant. Real linen. Someone is talking about portfolio reallocation and you understand every word and you nod and say something intelligent back. And then you look down at your plate. And you have a clear, specific thought. My parents never sat at a table like this. Not sad. Not proud. Just true. You think about the man washing his car every Sunday. About your father circling bills with a pen. About the $1.89 ramen you ate not because you had to, but because spending more felt like tempting something bad. You miss something you can't name. Something from the before. Not the fear. Not the scarcity. Just the simplicity. The not knowing. The feeling that the world was the size of your neighborhood, and that was okay. You don't want to go back. But you also notice, quietly, that arriving somewhere new doesn't mean the old weight disappears. It means you're now carrying new weight too. Nobody told you that the view from higher up is clearer. They just didn't mention it's colder. Here's what you know now. The middle class was not a destination. It was a holding pattern. A temporary state that your parents' generation was told was permanent. A deal that seemed fair in 1975 and started quietly dissolving somewhere around the time you were learning to wear extra sweaters to save on heating. You didn't escape a class. You escaped a belief system. The belief that stability comes from employment. The belief that the responsible thing is to minimize spending, not maximize building. The belief that money is something you receive, not something you construct. Those beliefs were not wrong. They were just incomplete. And incomplete maps are dangerous because they look like complete ones. You think about your 8-year-old self at the kitchen table on a Saturday morning, watching your father's face while he circled something in the bills. If you could go back, not to change anything, just to sit beside him, you'd want to tell him something. Not about investing. Not about leverage or compounding or brokerage accounts. Just, you were doing everything right with what you were given. The system was the problem, not you. You never got to say that. So instead, you carry it. You carry the Saturday mornings and the 850 hours and the ramen and the extra sweater and the $300 that felt illegal and the $14,000 that felt serious and the dinner with the real linen and the cold view from higher up. You carry all of it. Because that's the truth nobody tells you about escaping. You don't leave anything behind. You just understand it differently. And one day, maybe, someone younger sits beside you while you're doing something at a table. And they watch your face. And they absorb something without asking what it means. And the cycle begins again, just with a better map this time. You thought this was about money. It never was. If this felt like your life, stay. Because at Noir Capital, we don't do motivation. We don't do hype. We do the real conversation. The one about how money actually works, what the middle class was never told, and what it costs to see clearly. Subscribe, because the next video starts where this one ended. And there's more to understand than you think. Noir Capital, see what others miss.